Sockcast, the podcast where I, Socrates, ask the questions. Today's question is, my autonomous car is 343% safer. It only runs over 1 ginger a year. What's wrong with that? In the studio today with us, we have Dion, the deontologist, Connor, the consequentialist, and Victoria, the virtue ethicist. We'll start by establishing their positions and get some conversation going. Let's hope we get some good discussions. First, we'll start off with Connor.
Thank you for having me on the show. So, I think that my car is better than everyone else's because it is, in absolute terms, the safest of them all. It's involved in the fewest road accidents and road deaths, so it's objectively the safest. If everyone switched to this car, then only a vanishingly small number of people would be killed or injured each year, thus making the world better for everyone. I have no personal biases about them, but this car just so happens to only ever kill ginger people. How does it achieve this? Well, we found that we lowered our overall road accident rates by doing away with 2 fairness metrics, demographic parity and equalized odds.
What are those?
Demographic parity is where model predictions are not made based on whether or not someone belongs to a particular demographic group. And equalized odds is the idea that a model's error rate should be equal for all groups in a population. We discarded these 2 notions of fairness and optimized the model strictly for the lowest number of road accidents. Obviously, this is the only metric that actually matters. The alternative would be to keep the overall error rate artificially high for everyone else, so that it is fair. But I think that that's immoral, on the grounds that at the end of the day, you're choosing to allow people to die, which I'm sure that we all agree is a bad thing. The situation is just like the Omelas thought experiment, where the well-being...
Wait, before you continue, can you please explain the Omelas thought experiment to our audience?
Oh, well, yes, of course I can. Let me introduce a hypothetical utopia called Omelas. In Omelas, every single one of the thousands of inhabitants is living a great life. Their well-being, life expectancy, and happiness are all fantastic, and they're all able to maximize their utility as people. However, Omelas' secret is that everyone's lifestyle is supported by some kind of machine that works by keeping one single child in perpetual misery. I think that Omelas is morally justified because the well-being of the many outweighs the lack of well-being of just one. Besides, if you don't like it, then you can just leave. I think that having extremely safe cars that only kill one minority group is basically the same as Omelas. We improve everyone in society's life at the expense of a tiny fraction of the population.
That was very interesting. Thank you. Dion, what's your take on this scenario?
Hello everyone, I'm Dion. Thanks for having me, Socrates. I can see 2 approaches here. The first one builds on the argument that the death of the ginger is foreseen, but not really an intended outcome. We could argue that...
Non-intended outcome, really? You're just taking the easy way out here.
Okay, you're right. Maybe I didn't think this through. And the Omelas scenario definitely emphasizes that we are talking about the kind of scenarios where people are willing to cause harm intentionally, if it is for the quote-unquote greater good. Let's see what duties we have in these scenarios. I can see a positive and a negative duty. Our positive duty is the moral obligation to aid or benefit others. So following the positive duty, we would switch to the safer autonomous car and we would want the inhabitants of Omelas to be maximally happy. Let's not forget that there's also a negative duty though, namely the moral obligation not to harm or injure others. Unfortunately, this seems to be exactly the cost of making the autonomous car safer and making the inhabitants of Omelas maximally happy. We must not disregard our negative duties as they carry more weight than the positive ones.
Why do we have to prioritize our negative duties over our positive duties?
Good question. The difference is that if we fail to uphold our positive duties, we wouldn't make the world a better place, but it would still be the same. If we fail to uphold our negative duties though, we would make the world a worse place intentionally. And that clearly is the far worse outcome. So coming back to the question of what is wrong with the scenario of making the autonomous car safer while sacrificing this ginger, and to the Omelas scenario as well, Both scenarios suggest that we can prioritize our positive duties over our negative duties if the results seem to justify it, but we must not be persuaded.
Also, the algorithm is trained on real-world data. We didn't set out to victimize ginger people. It just so happens to be the case that the system handles ginger people the worst, and there's no reason for us to keep the error rate for everyone else high. It's silly to allow everyone else to get hit by cars at the same rate when it's not necessary. At the end of the day, even though only ginger people are harmed by the system, there are altogether less traffic accidents, so the world is a better place.
That seems somewhat hypocritical after what you just said. In the Amala scenario, you do cause harm and make the same argument. So which one is it? It's not your fault, or you just don't care?
Well, yes, the child suffering is bad, but it's nobody's fault that the well-being of everyone in Omelas can be maximized by a child torturing device. It just so happens to be the case. There's a net benefit to everyone at the expense of just one person, and taking it away from them would be doing everyone a disservice.
Thanks. Very interesting. Next we have Victoria. I will pass it over to them to establish their position. What kind of person should you be in order to make the right decision every time? This is what we ask ourselves as those who believe in a life led by virtue ethics. There is no rigid rule to give us the correct answer, rather, dedication to act in accordance with virtues. A virtuous person responds well when met with ethical dilemmas because they are well. One of these core virtues is justice. In this scenario, a virtuous person would not drive this car as it hinders the flourishing of a whole group, the ginger people. This flawed design does not happen in a vacuum. Accepting this unfair distribution would result in a society that over time approves of more and more unfair decision-making and algorithmic injustice. The members of the society would slowly become blind to injustice, and this vice would creep into individual and collective character. This virtuous person would not stop at refusal to drive this car. They would exercise courage, another core value. The virtuous person would actively try to stop these vehicles from being driven in society. They would speak out, challenge the design, and advocate others to use alternative forms of transport. Thank you for that introduction. Would anyone like to respond?
Well, look, I mean, one ginger a year isn't too many, right? Statistically speaking, the overall safety benefits dwarf that tiny cost. We save hundreds of lives and only lose one.
My position does not accept that because the injustice is small, it should be permitted. When one accepts discrimination against a certain group, they reveal an awful lot about their character. This so-called small exception is a slippery slope, and justifying this harm means moving society towards callousness instead of compassion. From here, two things can either happen. A, people will accept this injustice and their character will degrade, or B, the internal persistent guilt felt by the community would lead to unhappiness because they cannot avoid feeling that they're living out of step with their nature as good and reasonable individuals. All of this means we're going farther and farther away from edumonia. You might be asking me what edumonia is. It's a word which I don't know how to pronounce.
Okay, but hear me out. The ginger populations are already declining, and statistically the one a year might not even stay constant, right? According to my calculation, in a few years there won't even be any gingers, so they wouldn't be around to actually be discriminated against. Aren't we heading towards the same outcome anyway?
Are you listening to me? The means matter to me. You can't build a good society on morally rotten foundations. A future where people are harmed is not virtuous if the way that you get there involves sacrificing some other people for the convenience of the rest. And I explained, every time someone follows through with an unjust action, or even tolerance of an unjust action, they're training themselves in vice. Habits shape character. You're basically happy to perform human sacrifice. You can't claim moral success while committing injustice along the way. Just ends brought about by vicious means are not virtuous. This is literally my whole argument.
I agree. As I explained before, there is a reason why we must prioritize our negative duties over our positive duties. If we wouldn't prioritize our negative duties, we would be allowed to actively make the world a worse place. Where would that get us?
And also, like I said, a virtuous person would be proactive in changing this horrible society. Like, maybe they would organize a national campaign for every citizen to wear a ginger wig. Then what? Imagine, your system wouldn't know who to profile anymore. It would break.
Oh my god, you're messing with my system. The system is clearly defined, predictable, and measurable. I don't appreciate stupid attempts at trying games with wigs to produce chaos for no reason.
Actually, I agree with Connor here. You must not lie, also not about the color of your hair. It is always wrong to do so without expectations. I thought you just said that the means matter to you, and now you're happy to lie and mess with the system just to make your point? You preach virtue, but clearly act otherwise. How hypocritical.
Exactly. You're stepping away from living in accordance with the great virtue of telling the truth. If wigs are deception, then deception is vice.
No, this is not deception. It's activism and civil disobedience. The golden means allow us to strike the balance between passive obedience and justified rebellion. Sometimes cultivating virtue requires disrupting unjust system. It would be the courageous thing to do. Nice back and forth there. Just to get Victoria's take on Amelas, I don't think he said anything. It's bad, obviously, for the reasons I've already mentioned. A person who lives in accordance with virtues would not only walk away from Amelas, but free the suffering of the child and advocate for the rest of the Amelas population to change their way. Thank you very much for your time today and this very interesting discussion. Many valuable points have been made. Just for the record, I know I have a white beard, but I was born a brunette. I'd like to give the question back to our listeners so they decide what they think for themselves. The answer lies within them, and by questioning it, they will bring it out. Let us know in the comments what you think and what you've come up with. And stay tuned for next week's episodes on the ethics of using AI in hiring processes. Bye!